When I met Emily, it felt like stepping into a dream. She was vibrant, full of energy, and had this laugh that could make a room brighter. I, on the other hand, was quieter, a man of routine and stability. While Emily thrived on spontaneity and adventure, I found comfort in planning, in knowing what came next. Opposites attract, they say, and for a while, it felt like we balanced each other perfectly. We'd been married for 7 years. I worked as a software engineer, a job that wasn't flashy but paid the bills and gave us a solid life. Emily worked in event planning, perfect for someone with her charisma and flair for the dramatic. She loved being the center of attention, and honestly, I loved watching her shine. She had this magnetic quality that pulled everyone in. Over the years, though, I began to notice small cracks. Emily would always talk about how she craved excitement, how she felt life was too short to live it on a hamster wheel. She'd tease me, saying I was the safe choice. And while she always laughed after, there was something in her tone that didn't feel like a joke. I'd dismiss it, convincing myself that couples have these moments and that we were strong enough to ride them out. Our relationship had evolved, or maybe devolved, into predictable patterns. I'd come home from work, and she'd tell me about her day. Sometimes, she'd talk about her friends or a new trendy bar she wanted to try. More often than not, I'd be too tired to keep up with her boundless energy. "You should go out with your friends," I'd say, not realizing I was slowly nudging her toward a life outside of our own. Emily was the life of the party, and I was content to watch from the sidelines. At least, that's how it had always been. I thought it worked, her fire, my calm. But lately, I'd been feeling like we weren't walking the same path anymore. And while I tried to convince myself it was just a phase, there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. She had a group of friends who seemed to share her zest for life. They were always planning getaways or hosting elaborate dinners. I liked them well enough, but I never quite felt like I fit in. They had this easy confidence, a way of laughing too loud and living too fast. Emily thrived in their company, and as much as I hated to admit it, I always felt a little inadequate around them. One evening, as we sat on the couch, she brought up a trip they were planning. "We're thinking of flying to this amazing resort in the Maldives," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Just the girls. It'll be so fun." It sounded extravagant, like most things her friends did, but I smiled and said, "You should go. You deserve a break." She seemed surprised but pleased. I told myself I was being a good husband, encouraging her to enjoy herself. But deep down, I felt a knot of unease. As I watched her talk animatedly about the trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, bit by bit, day by day. Emily and I had always been different, but I never thought those differences would turn into a chasm. Yet, in the months leading up to her trip, it felt like we were on opposite sides of something vast and unspoken. She started spending more time with her friends, and our evenings together became fewer. "It's just for a few weeks until the trip," she'd say. "We're working out all the details, and I need to be there for the planning." I'd nod, telling myself it was normal. People drifted in and out of routines. This was just one of those times. Except it wasn't. Our conversations, once filled with warmth and laughter, had turned into a script. "How was your day?" "Fine." "What's for dinner?" "Whatever you want." And then silence. Sometimes, I'd watch her across the table as she scrolled through her phone, smiling at something she wasn't sharing with me. I told myself not to ask. I didn't want to come off as jealous or controlling. I wasn't blind, though. I noticed the subtle changes. She'd spend extra time getting ready when she was meeting her friends. There was a new perfume, a lighter, flirtier scent than the one she'd worn for years. And then there were the late nights. "We got carried away catching up," she'd say when she came home well past midnight, her cheeks flushed. I didn't press her. I trusted her, or at least I wanted to. My own life felt stagnant in comparison. Work was the same grind day in and day out. The things that once brought me joy, our quiet weekends, the little traditions we'd built over the years, were starting to feel hollow. I thought about suggesting a date night, something to reconnect us, but every time I worked up the courage, she'd be too busy or too tired. "Maybe I'm overthinking it," I told my best friend, Nathan, over beers one Friday night. Nathan was my polar opposite, a no-nonsense kind of guy who had never been married and didn't plan to be. You know Emily, I said. She's just got that restless energy. She's always needed more excitement than I can give her. Nathan frowned, taking a sip of his drink. Sounds like you're giving her all the space in the world, man. Maybe too much. You sure you two are okay? Yeah, we're fine, I said, though the words felt more like a question than an answer. The truth was, I didn't know if we were okay. I couldn't tell if the distance between us was normal, or if I was just too close to see the cracks forming. I wanted to believe it was just a phase, that things would go back to the way they were after her trip, but a small voice in the back of my mind kept whispering doubts. One evening, as Emily packed for a weekend getaway with her friends, a pre-trip bonding session, she called it, I leaned against the doorframe of our bedroom, watching her fold clothes into a suitcase. You've been going out a lot lately, I said, trying to keep my tone light. She didn't look up. It's just this trip. You know how much it means to me. Yeah, I know. I just miss you, I guess. That made her pause. She turned to look at me, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place crossing her face. Guilt? Annoyance? I miss you too, she said softly. We'll have time when I get back, okay? Things will settle down. I nodded, though her words felt like a band-aid over a wound I couldn't see. Later that night, as I lay in bed alone, I stared at the ceiling and tried to shake the feeling gnawing at my chest. Emily was my wife, my partner. She wouldn't betray that, would she? I didn't want to believe it, but as sleep eluded me, I couldn't help but wonder if I was fooling myself. The weeks before Emily's trip were marked by an eerie sense of disconnection. She was physically present but emotionally absent, as though her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. I didn't know how to bring her back to me, or if she even wanted to come back. I tried, though. One Friday night, I surprised her with a reservation at her favorite restaurant, the cozy little Italian spot where we'd celebrated anniversaries in the past. She'd seemed genuinely touched when I told her. That's sweet of you, she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. But even during dinner, her phone buzzed incessantly. Every few minutes, she'd glance down, her fingers twitching like she wanted to respond. Something important? I finally asked, trying to mask the irritation in my voice. Just the girls, she said with a quick smile. We're finalizing the itinerary. You know how they are. They can't make a decision to save their lives. I smiled weakly, trying not to let the comment bother me. But it did. I couldn't remember the last time she was that engaged in a conversation with me. The next day, while she was out running errands, I found myself wandering into our bedroom. Her suitcase sat open on the bed, half-packed with swimsuits, sun hats, and lightweight dresses. It looked more like she was preparing for a romantic getaway than a trip with friends. I felt a pang of guilt as I stood there, staring at her things. I'd never been the type to invade her privacy, but my curiosity, and the unease I'd been carrying for weeks, got the better of me. I glanced over at her nightstand, where her phone was charging. Don't. The voice in my head was firm, and I listened. If I crossed that line, there'd be no coming back. But the fact that I even considered it made me feel sick. What had happened to us? To the trust we'd spent years building? When Emily came home later that afternoon, I helped her bring in the groceries. You okay? She asked, her tone casual. You seem off. I'm fine, I lied, giving her what I hoped was a convincing smile. Just tired. She nodded, accepting the answer without question, and I hated how easily she dismissed it. Maybe I wanted her to press, to dig deeper, to care. But she didn't. Instead, she launched into another story about her friends' antics, how they'd spent an hour debating whether to book an excursion to some private island. I tried to listen, but the words washed over me like static. I didn't want to be the insecure husband, the guy who couldn't handle his wife having a life outside their marriage. But something about the way she spoke, how animated she became whenever her friends were involved, left me feeling hollow. It was as if I didn't fit into her world anymore. That night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I tried to bring it up. You're really excited about this trip, huh? She turned to me, her face lighting up. Oh, so much. It's going to be incredible. Just what I need. What we need, I said gently, hoping she'd catch the hint. Her smile faltered for a moment, but then she nodded. Yeah, of course. but I could tell she didn't mean it. In the days that followed, she became more distant. Late nights out with her friends turned into weekends away. She'd text me updates, short, clipped messages that felt more like obligations than genuine communication. I started to feel like a placeholder in my own marriage, a convenient fixture in her life rather than a partner. And yet, I still didn't press her. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what to do about it. When she finally left for the trip, I told myself it would be a chance for us both to reset. Maybe the time apart would help us miss each other. Maybe she'd come back with a renewed appreciation for what we had. But as I stood at the airport, waving goodbye to her as she disappeared through security, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. The morning of Emily's departure was strangely quiet. She was up early, flitting around the house with a kind of nervous energy, double-checking her packing list and adjusting the strap on her suitcase. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching her as she moved. "You've got everything?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I think so," she replied, her voice unusually chipper. She looked radiant in her travel outfit, a breezy white blouse and fitted jeans. Her excitement was palpable, and as much as I wanted to share in it, all I felt was a gnawing unease. I drove her to the airport, the car ride filled with small talk. She talked about how much she was looking forward to the resort, the infinity pool, the private beach, the luxury villas. I nodded along, forcing a smile when she mentioned how nice it would be to get away from everything. When we reached the terminal, I helped her with her bags. She turned to me, her face glowing with anticipation. "Thank you for being so supportive about this," she said, giving me a quick hug. "I know you're not a big fan of these kinds of trips." "It's fine," I said, brushing off her comment. "You deserve to enjoy yourself." She smiled, but there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. "I'll call you when I land, okay?" I nodded. "Have fun, Em." And with that, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of travelers with a wave and a smile. I stood there for a moment, watching her until she was out of sight. The knot in my stomach tightened. The first call came that evening, just as she promised. She was bubbly and full of life, telling me about the flight and how beautiful the resort was. "You wouldn't believe it, babe," she said. "The water is crystal clear, and the villa is incredible. It's like something out of a dream." I tried to mirror her enthusiasm, but my responses felt flat. "That's great," I said. "I'm glad you're having a good time." For the next couple of days, her calls and texts became less frequent. When we did speak, it was always short, her voice rushed and distracted. "Sorry, babe, I've got to go. The girls are waiting for me." Or, "I'll call you later, okay? We're about to head out." It wasn't like Emily to be so brief, but I didn't want to be the overbearing husband. I wanted her to enjoy her time away, even if it meant I had to push my doubts aside. But the doubts kept creeping back. On the third night, I was lying in bed when her text came through. "Just got back from dinner. Heading to bed soon. Miss you, Red Heart." Something about it felt off. The message was too perfect, too rehearsed, like she was trying to convince me, or herself, that everything was fine. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "Miss you too. Sleep well." The next day, I got a call from her best friend, Megan. She was slurring her words, clearly a few drinks deep. "Hey, just wanted to check in on you," she said, her voice unnaturally cheerful. "I'm fine," I replied, confused. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Oh, no reason," she said quickly. "Just, it must be weird with him gone. Anyway, gotta go. Take care." The call ended abruptly, leaving me more suspicious than ever. Megan wasn't the type to randomly check in with me. She was Emily's friend, not mine. And her tone, it felt like she was trying to cover something up. I tried to push the thoughts aside, but they lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but imagine Emily at the resort. I pictured her laughing, her hair damp from the pool, her skin glowing from the sun. But in my mind's eye, she wasn't with her friends. She was with someone else. I hated myself for thinking it, but the suspicion had taken root, and I didn't know how to make it go away. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Megan. "Hope you're doing okay. We've got him covered. She's in good hands. Red heart. Good hands. I stared at the words, my stomach churning. Something wasn't right. By the time Emily had been gone 4 days, the unease that had been gnawing at me became impossible to ignore. Her texts and calls had dwindled to almost nothing. When she did reach out, her messages felt like they were sent out of obligation rather than affection. Busy day today. The resort is incredible. Wish you were here, she wrote. But there were no details, no real connection behind the words. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding something back. The night of the 4th day, I scrolled through my phone, looking at old pictures of us. Emily with her wide, dazzling smile. Emily on our honeymoon in Hawaii, laughing as the ocean waves crashed at her feet. Emily curled up on the couch in one of my old sweatshirts, her hair a mess, her face glowing from the light of the TV. How had we gone from that to this? I put the phone down and paced the living room. My thoughts spiraled, replaying every interaction we'd had over the past few months. Her late nights out, the endless planning for this trip, the sudden distance between us. My gut was telling me something I didn't want to believe. I tried to distract myself by turning on the TV, but I couldn't focus. After a while, I gave in to the curiosity I'd been trying to suppress. I logged onto social media and checked her profiles. Nothing. She hadn't posted a single picture from the trip. That wasn't like Emily at all. Her friends, however, were a different story. As I scrolled through their posts, I saw snapshots of their trip. Sunsets over the ocean, elaborate cocktails by the pool, and group photos of the girls smiling in their bikinis. Emily was in a few of the pictures, but she always seemed slightly apart. Smiling, yes, but not her usual radiant self. Then I saw it. A video that one of her friends had posted to their story. It was a short clip of the group dancing by the resort's bar, the camera panning over each of them. At the very end of the clip, just before it cut off, I spotted Emily in the background. She wasn't dancing with her friends. She was standing close to a man, a tall, broad-shouldered stranger with a confident smile. His hand was on her waist, and she was laughing up at him like he was the funniest person in the world. I felt a chill run through me. It was nothing concrete, just a moment caught on camera, a split second that might not mean anything. But it didn't sit right with me. I replayed the video over and over, analyzing every frame. The way his hand lingered on her, the way she leaned into him, the way she laughed, her head tilting back, completely at ease. By the time I put my phone down, it was past midnight, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. The next day, I decided to call her. When she picked up, her voice was light and breezy, like nothing was wrong. "Hey babe," she said. "How's everything at home?" "Fine," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "How's the trip?" "It's amazing," she gushed. "The weather's perfect, and the food is incredible. We've been doing all these fun activities, kayaking, snorkeling, you name it." "Sounds nice," I said. "Who's that guy in the video Megan posted?" There was a pause, just long enough to make my heart race. "Oh, him," she said, laughing it off. "He's just someone we met at the bar. He's here with his friends. Super friendly guy. Nothing to worry about." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But her tone was too casual, too rehearsed. "Okay," I said quietly. "Just checking." "Don't be silly," she said, her voice light. "You know you're the only one for me." But the words felt hollow, and as we ended the call, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been lied to. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized I didn't know what to believe anymore. After my call with Emily, I couldn't ignore the growing storm in my gut. Her explanation about the man at the bar didn't sit right with me. Just a friendly guy, she'd said. But the way her voice had lingered, the way she'd laughed it off, it felt too smooth, too prepared. The next few days were a blur. I threw myself into work, hoping the distraction would keep my thoughts from spiraling. But every spare moment, every quiet second, my mind wandered back to Emily and that man. I thought about their body language in the video, the way she leaned into him like they were sharing some private joke. Her calls became even less frequent. The first couple of days, she'd at least called in the evenings to say goodnight. But by day 5, her texts had dwindled to a quick, busy today, talk tomorrow, and nothing more. I decided to keep my suspicions to myself. I didn't want to sound paranoid or push her further away, but it was eating me alive. Every message she sent felt like a riddle, every gap in communication like a flashing red flag. That night, I sat in our bedroom and stared at her side of the bed. Her favorite book was still on the nightstand, a dog-eared paperback she always meant to finish but never did. I reached over and opened the cover, flipping through its pages. A pressed flower slipped out and fell into my lap. It was a daisy. She'd picked it during a hike we'd taken together on our 3rd anniversary. "For luck," she'd said, tucking it into her book with a smile. I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to cling to that memory, to the woman I'd married, the one who loved me without question, who made me feel like I was enough. But that woman felt so far away now, like a shadow I couldn't quite grasp. As the week dragged on, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. People change, relationships evolve. Maybe this was just a rough patch. Maybe the distance I was feeling wasn't real. But then Megan called me again. It was late, almost 10 p.m., and I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. When my phone buzzed, her name flashed on the screen. "Hey," I answered cautiously. "Hi," Megan chirped, her voice slightly slurred. "Just wanted to check in again. How's it going?" "Fine," I said, my tone flat. "Everything okay with Emily?" "Oh, yeah, she's great," Megan said quickly. "Having a blast. You know her. Life of the party." There was a pause, and I could hear muffled laughter in the background. "Where is she right now?" I asked, my voice tight. I think she's in her room. Or maybe by the pool." "I'm not sure," Megan said, her words stumbling over each other. "We've all been so busy, it's hard to keep track." "Megan," I said firmly, "is there something you're not telling me?" Her laughter stopped. No, of course not," she said quickly. "Everything's fine. Really." But her tone betrayed her. She sounded nervous, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. After we hung up, I sat there, my mind racing. Megan was hiding something. I was sure of it. And if she was lying, it could only mean one thing. Emily was, too. The next morning, I got another text from Emily. "Can't talk right now, babe. Busy day ahead. Love you, Redheart." It was the same script she'd been sending me all week, and this time, I couldn't bring myself to reply. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble beneath me. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down. The night it all started to come apart, I was sitting in the kitchen nursing a beer, staring at my phone like it was a lifeline. Emily's silence had grown louder, more pronounced, and Megan's shaky reassurances only made my suspicions harder to ignore. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how bad it was yet. And then, my phone buzzed. A message from Megan. It was short, almost casual. "Hey, we should talk. Call me when you can." I stared at the text, my heart pounding. She'd never reached out to me like this before. If she wanted to talk, it had to mean something. With a deep breath, I dialed her number, my hand shaking slightly as I pressed the call button. "Hey," Megan answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded cautious, like she was bracing herself. "What's going on, Megan?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. "Why do we need to talk?" There was a pause, and I could hear her take a deep breath on the other end. "I don't want to get involved," she said finally. "But I think you should know." "Know what?" I demanded, my voice rising. "It's Emily," she said softly. She's been spending a lot of time with this guy. His name's Alex. He's staying at the same resort." The name hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Alex," I repeated, my voice flat. "I didn't think anything of it at first," Megan continued, her words spilling out in a rush. "But they've been really close. I don't want to assume anything, but it doesn't look good, okay? I thought you deserved to know." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. "How close are we talking?" I finally managed to ask. There was a pause. "Last night, after we all went to bed, I saw them together," she admitted. "On the beach. They looked intimate." My grip tightened around the phone. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I feel guilty," she said quietly. I've been trying to brush it off, to tell myself it's none of my business. But you don't deserve this, and I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I thanked her, though the words felt hollow, and hung up. My body felt heavy, my chest tight. Emily. My Emily. I wanted to call her right then and there, to demand an explanation, but I stopped myself. What would she say? Would she deny it? Make excuses? The Emily I knew, the Emily I thought I knew, would never hurt me like this. But Megan's words were impossible to ignore. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily on that beach with Alex, laughing, leaning into him. The image was burned into my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push it away. The next morning, I woke to another text from her. Hey babe, hope you're doing okay. Things are amazing here. Miss you. Red heart. I stared at the message, my anger bubbling to the surface. She was lying to me, pretending everything was fine while she what? Betrayed me? Replaced me? I didn't respond. Instead, I called Megan again. Do you have proof? I asked, skipping any sort of greeting. Proof? She echoed, confused. Pictures, videos, anything. My voice was sharp, almost desperate. She hesitated. I don't, but I know some of the other girls might. They've been taking pictures all week. I can ask around. Do it, I said, my voice cold. By the end of the day, Megan had sent me a picture. It wasn't explicit, just Emily and Alex sitting together on a lounge chair, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. But it was enough. It was enough to break me. I stared at the photo Megan sent, my hands trembling as I zoomed in. Emily's face was tilted up toward Alex's, her expression soft, a smile playing on her lips. His arm was draped over her shoulder, casual but intimate, like they'd known each other forever. I didn't need to see anything else. This wasn't just friendly. This wasn't harmless. This was betrayal. I felt like the walls of my world were closing in, the life I thought I knew crumbling beneath me. I'd loved Emily with everything I had, and now it felt like she'd ripped my heart out and handed it to someone else. I called her that evening. When she answered, her voice was as bright and carefree as ever. Hey babe, how's everything? I couldn't hold back anymore. Cut the act, Emily, I said, my voice low and cold. I know. There was a beat of silence, followed by a nervous laugh. Know what? About Alex. About the beach. About all of it. Her breath hitched, and I could practically hear her scrambling to come up with a response. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice wavered, giving her away. Don't lie to me, I snapped. Megan told me everything. She even sent me a picture. So, don't insult me by pretending nothing's going on. Her silence was deafening. Say something, Emily, I demanded. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I shot back. Because it sure as hell looks like you've been sneaking around with another man while I've been sitting at home, trusting you. I wasn't sneaking around, she said defensively. We were just spending time together. He's a nice guy, and we clicked. That's all. Do you hear yourself right now? I asked, my voice rising. You clicked with him? You don't click with other men when you're married, Emily. That's not how this works. She started crying then, her words spilling out in a rush. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear, I didn't. I've been feeling so disconnected from us, from everything. And he made me feel alive again. Alive? I repeated, my chest tightening. So what was I, Emily? Dead weight? No, she said quickly. I love you. I do. This was a mistake. A mistake? I laughed bitterly. A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt. A mistake is taking the wrong exit on the highway. You don't just accidentally fall into someone else's arms, Emily. She sobbed on the other end of the line, but I didn't feel any sympathy. I was too angry, too hurt. I'll be on the first flight home, she said through her tears. We can talk about this, fix this. Don't bother, I said coldly. Stay there. Enjoy the rest of your trip with Alex. When you get back, your things will be waiting for you in a box. I hung up before she could respond, my hand shaking as I set the phone down. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at nothing. My mind felt numb, my emotions too raw to process. But beneath the pain, there was a spark of something else, something dark and vengeful. If she wanted to ruin what we had, fine. But I wasn't going to go down quietly. The next morning, I called a lawyer and started the process of filing for divorce. I also reached out to a close friend, someone I trusted, and confided in them about what had happened. They were furious on my behalf, and as we talked, they said something that stuck with me. Don't let her walk all over you. Make her feel the loss. It was time to take control. That evening, I went out with a few friends and let loose for the first time in years. It wasn't long before I met someone, a gorgeous, confident woman who made me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. One drink turned into two, and before I knew it, we were tangled up in each other, her lips pressing against mine like she could erase the pain Emily had caused. It wasn't love. It wasn't even about her. It was about me, reclaiming a piece of my dignity, showing myself that I could move on. The next day, I changed the locks on our house and packed up Emily's belongings. I didn't care where she went or who she stayed with. She'd made her choice, and now I was making mine. When she returned a few days later, I didn't even see her. I left the box of her things on the porch and a copy of the divorce papers taped to the door. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a start. Emily came back on a Wednesday evening. I wasn't home. I timed it that way intentionally. I couldn't stand the thought of facing her, not after everything. Instead, I stayed out, waiting for the text or call I knew would come when she saw her belongings on the porch and the divorce papers taped to the front door. It didn't take long. My phone buzzed, her name flashing across the screen. I ignored the first call, then the second. By the third, I couldn't resist the urge to hear what she had to say, so I answered, my voice cold. What do you want? What the hell is this? She snapped, her voice cracking with a mix of anger and desperation. You're seriously doing this? Just throwing me out like I'm nothing? You made that choice the moment you decided I wasn't enough, I said evenly. You didn't think about what we had when you were off playing house with Alex, so don't act surprised now. Her voice softened, turning into a pleading whimper. It wasn't like that, I swear. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. Can't we just talk? Please. I felt a pang of something, anger, sadness, maybe even pity, but I held firm. I don't owe you anything, Emily. You knew exactly what you were doing. I trusted you, and you threw that trust away. There's no coming back from this. She started crying then, her sobs loud and unrestrained. We can fix this, she insisted. I love you. I've always loved you. Please don't do this. Love? I scoffed. You don't destroy the people you love. And as for fixing this, there's nothing left to fix, Emily. It's over. She kept crying, begging me to give her another chance, but I couldn't listen to it anymore. I hung up, my hands trembling as I set the phone down. The next morning, I woke up to a string of messages from her. They ranged from apologies to desperate pleas to outright anger. I made a mistake, but we can get through this. You're being so cruel. Please don't throw away everything we've built. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded the messages to my lawyer, making sure there was a record of her attempts to contact me. That afternoon, I got a call from Megan. She's a mess, she said bluntly. So? I replied, not bothering to hide my indifference. I'm not saying you should forgive her, Megan said carefully, but maybe you could at least hear her out. She's devastated, and she knows she screwed up. She's only devastated because she got caught, I said. If I hadn't found out, she'd still be sneaking around with Alex and lying to my face. Megan sighed. You're not wrong. But for what it's worth, I think she's genuinely sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said flatly. It doesn't undo the betrayal. Emily's attempts to reach me didn't stop. She showed up at the house once, pounding on the door and shouting for me to let her in. I stayed silent, watching from an upstairs window as she sobbed on the porch. Eventually, she left, and I felt a twisted sense of relief when her car disappeared down the street. A few days later, I ran into her at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen her since she'd come back. She looked different, tired, her face pale and drawn. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. "Can we please talk?" she said, stepping in front of my cart. "We don't have anything to talk about," I replied, my tone cold. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "I still love you," she said desperately. "You can't just walk away from us." "Watch me," I said, pushing past her and leaving her standing there in the aisle. That night, I packed the last of her belongings and arranged to have them delivered to her sister's house. I didn't want any reminders of her in my home or my life. The process of divorce moved quickly after that. With the evidence I had, there was little she could contest. By the end of the month, I'd filed the papers, and she was officially served. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. The process was smoother than I'd expected. Emily didn't fight me on anything. Maybe she realized she had no ground to stand on, or maybe she just didn't have the energy to drag things out. Either way, by the time I walked out of the courthouse with the papers in hand, I felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness. 11 years of marriage had ended with a handful of signatures. Just like that. In the weeks that followed, I started putting my life back together. I moved some furniture around, redecorated the house, and threw out things that reminded me of her. It wasn't about erasing her, exactly. It was about reclaiming my space, making it mine again. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support in ways I didn't even know I needed. Nathan, my no-nonsense best friend, dragged me to the gym and convinced me to sign up for a hiking group. "You've spent too much time indoors, man," he said. "It's time to live a little." At first, I went along just to humor him, but over time, I started to enjoy it. There was something cathartic about pushing my body, about sweating out the anger and pain that had been sitting heavy in my chest for so long. Emily tried reaching out a few times after the divorce was finalized. I ignored her calls and texts, though I did read the messages she sent. They were a mix of apologies and attempts to explain herself. "I know I hurt you, but I was lost. I'll regret what I did for the rest of my life. Please, let me prove to you that I can be better." I never responded, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. Anger, sadness, confusion. They all swirled together, and I knew that talking to her would only dredge it all back up. One day, I got a message from Megan. She told me that Emily had moved out of the area, back in with her parents for the time being. "She's trying to figure out what to do next," Megan said. "Good for her," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "She still loves you, you know," Megan added hesitantly. I didn't respond to that. Over time, the pain began to dull. It didn't disappear, but it became manageable, a quiet ache instead of a sharp stab. I learned to live with it, to let it shape me without defining me. The woman I met at the bar, the one who'd given me a taste of something I thought I'd lost, reached out to me again. Her name was Rachel, and after a few weeks of texting, we decided to meet for coffee. It was casual, no pressure, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like myself again. As we sat across from each other, laughing over something ridiculous, I realized that I wasn't broken anymore. Damaged, maybe. Changed, definitely, but not broken. Looking back, I don't regret how things played out. Emily's betrayal hurt more than I ever thought possible, but it also forced me to take a hard look at myself and my life. I realized how much I'd been coasting, how I'd let our marriage become something routine and uninspired. I wasn't to blame for what she did. Nothing could excuse that, but I did learn from it. The biggest lesson? I deserved better. And for the first time in years, I was determined to make sure I got it.